Hey guys, today we are going to read Class 10th History Rise of Nationalism in Europe Part 2. What did liberal nationalism stand for? Ideas of national unity in early 19th century Europe were closely allied to the ideology of liberalism. The liberalism derives from the Latin root liber, meaning free. For the new middle classes, liberalism stood for freedom for the individual and equality of before the law. Politically, it emphasized the concept of government by consent. Since the French Revolution, liberalism had stood for the end of autocracy and clerical privileges, a constitution, and a representative government through parliament. 19th century liberals also stressed the inviolability of private property. Yet equality before the law did not necessarily stand for universal suffrage. You will recall that in revolutionary France, which marked the first political experiment in liberal democracy, the right to vote and to get elected was granted exclusively to property-owning men. Men without property and all women were excluded from political rights. Only for a brief period under the Jacobins did all adult males enjoy suffrage. However, the Napoleonic Code went back to limited suffrage and reduced women to the status of a minor, subject to the authority of fathers and husbands. Throughout the 19th and early 20th century, women and non-propertied men organized opposition movements demanding equal political rights. In the economic sphere, liberalism stood for the freedom of markets and the abolition of state-imposed restrictions on the movement of goods and capital. During the 19th century, this was a strong demand of the emerging middle classes. Let us take an example of the German-speaking regions in the first half of the 19th century. Napoleon's administrative measures had created out of countless small principalities a confederation of 39 states. Each of these possessed its own currency and weights and measures. A merchant traveling in 1833 from Hamburg to Nuremberg to sell his goods would have had to pass through 11 custom barriers and pay a custom duty of 5% at each of them. Duties were often levied according to the weight or measurement of the goods. As each region had its own system of weight and measures, this involved time-consuming calculation. The measure of cloth, for example, was the ille, which is which in each region stood for a different length. An ille of textile material bought in Frankfurt would get you 54.7 centimeter of cloth. In Mainz, 55.1 centimeter. In Nuremberg, 65.6 centimeter. In Freiburg, 53.5 centimeter. Such conditions were viewed as obstacles to economic exchange and growth by the new commercial classes, who argued for the creation of a unified economic territory, allowing the unhindered movement of goods, people and capital. In 1834, a custom union or Zollverein was formed at the initiative of Prussia and joined by most of the German states. The union abolished tariff barriers and reduced the number of currencies from over 30 to 2. The creation of a network of railways further stimulated mobility, harnessing economic interests to national unification. A wave of economic nationalism strengthened the wider nationalist sentiments growing at the time. A new conservatism after 1815. Following the defeat of Napoleon in 1815, European governments were driven by a spirit of conservatism. Conservatives believed that established traditional institutions of state and society, like the monarchy, the church, social hierarchies, property, and the family, should be preserved. Most conservatives, however, did not propose a return to the society of pre-revolutionary days. Rather, they released from the changes initiated by Napoleon that modernization could in fact strengthen traditional institutions like the monarchy. It could make state power more effective and strong. A modern army, an efficient bureaucracy, a dynamic economy, the abolition of feudalism and serfdom could strengthen the autocratic monarchies of Europe. In 1815, representatives of the European powers Britain, Russia, Prussia, and Austria, who had collectively defeated, met at Vienna to draw up a settlement for Europe. The Congress was hosted by the Austrian Chancellor Duke Metternich. The delegates drew up the Treaty of Vienna of 1815 with the object of undoing most of the changes that had come about in Europe during the Napoleonic Wars. The Bourbon dynasty, which had been deposed during the French Revolution, was restored to power, and France lost the territories it had annexed under Napoleon. A series of states were set up on the boundaries of France to prevent French expansion in future. Thus, the Kingdom of the Netherlands, which included Belgium, was set up in the north, and Genoa was added to Piedmont in the south. Prussia was given important new territories on its western frontiers, while Austria was given control of northern Italy. But the German Confederation of 39 states that had been set up by Napoleon was left untouched. In the east, Russia was given part of Poland, while Prussia was given a portion of Saxony. The main intention was to restore the monarchies that had been overthrown by Napoleon and create a new conservative order in Europe. Conservative regimes set up in 1815 were autocratic. They did not tolerate criticism and dissent, and sought to curb activities that questioned the legitimacy of autocratic governments. Most of them imposed censorship laws to control what was said in newspapers, books, plays, and songs, and reflected the ideas of liberty and freedom. Here you can see a image which includes a club of thinkers in which the board on the right lists the rules of the club, which include silence is the first commandment of the learned society. To avoid the eventuality whereby a member of this club may succumb to the temptation of speech, muzzles will be distributed to members upon entering. Associated with the French Revolution. The memory of the French Revolution, nonetheless, continued to inspire liberals. One of the major issues taken up by the liberal nationalists who criticized the new conservative order was freedom of the press. The revolutionaries during the years of following 1815, the fear of repression drove many liberal nationalists underground. Secret societies sprang up in many European states to train revolutionaries and spread their ideas. To be revolutionary at this time meant a commitment to oppose monarchical forms that had been established after the Vienna Congress, and to fight for liberty and freedom. Most of these revolutionaries also saw the creation of nation states as a necessary part of this struggle for freedom. One such individual was the Italian revolutionary Giuseppe Mazzini. Born in Genoa in 1805, he became a member of the secret society of the Carbonari. As a young man of 24, he was sent into exile in 1831 for attempting revolution in Liguria. He subsequently founded two more underground societies, first Young Italy in Marseilles and then Young Europe in Berne, whose members were like-minded young men from Poland, France, Italy, and the German states. Mazzini believed that the God had intended nations to be the natural units of mankind, so Italy could not continue to be a patchwork of small states and kingdoms. It had to be forged into a single unified republic within a wider alliance of nations. This unification alone could be the basis of Italian liberty. Following his model, secret societies were set up in Germany, France, Switzerland, and Poland. Mazzini's relentless opposition to monarchy and his vision of democratic republics frightened the conservatives. Metternich described him as the most dangerous enemy of our social order. The Age of Revolutions, 1830 to 1848. As conservative regimes tried to consolidate their power, liberalism and nationalism came to be increasingly associated with revolution in many regions of Europe, such as Italian and German states. The provinces of the Ottoman Empire, Ireland, and Poland. These revolutions were led by the liberal nationalists belonging to the educated middle class elite, among whom were professors, school teachers, clerks, and members of the commercial middle classes. The first upheaval took place in France in July 1830. The Bourbon kings, who had been restored to power during the conservative reaction after 1815, were now overthrown by liberal revolutionaries who installed a constitutional monarchy with Louis Philippe at its head. When France sneezes, Metternich once remarked, the rest of the Europe catches cold. The July Revolution sparked an uprising in Brussels which led to Belgium breaking away from the United Kingdom of Netherlands, an event that mobilized nationalist feelings among the educated elite across Europe was the Greek War of Independence. Greece had Greece had been a part of the Ottoman Empire since the 15th century. The growth of revolutionary nationalism in Europe sparked off a struggle for independence amongst the Greeks, which began in 1821. Nationalists in Greece got support from other Greeks living in exile and also from many West Europeans who had sympathies for ancient Greek culture. Poets and artists lauded Greece as the cradle of European civilization and mobilized public opinion to support its struggle against a Muslim empire. The English poet Lord Byron organized funds and later went to a fight in the war, where he died of fever in 1824. Finally, the Treaty of Constantinople of 1832 recognized Greece as an independent nation. The Romantic imagination and national feeling. The development of nationalism did not come about only through wars and territorial expansion. Culture played an important role in creating the idea of the nation. Art and poetry, Stories and music helped express and shape nationalist feelings. Let us look at Romanticism, a cultural movement which sought to develop a particular form of nationalist sentiment. Romantic artists and poets generally criticized the glorification of reason and science and focused instead on emotions, intuition, and mystical feelings. Their effort was to create a sense of shared belonging, shared collective belonging, heritage, a common cultural past as the basis of a nation. Other romantics, such as German philosopher Johann Gottfried Herder (1744 to 1803), claimed that true German culture was to be discovered among the common people. Das Volk. It was through folk songs, folk poetry, and folk dances that the true spirit of the nation, Volksgeist, was popularized. So, collecting and recording these forms of folk culture was essential to the project of nation building. The emphasis on vernacular language and the collection of local folklore was not just to recover an ancient national spirit, but also to carry the modern nationalists' message to large audiences who were mostly illiterate. This was especially so in the case of Poland, which had been partitioned at the end of the 18th century by great powers Russia, Prussia, and Austria. Even though Poland no longer existed as an independent territory, national feelings were kept alive through music and language. Karol Kurpinski, for example, celebrated the national struggle through his operas and music, turning folk dance and like the Polonias and Mazurka into nationalist feeling. Languages too played an important role in developing nationalist sentiments. After Russian occupation, the Polish language was forced out of the schools and the Russian language was imposed everywhere. In 1831, an armed rebellion against Russian rule took place, which was ultimately crushed. Following this, many members of the clergy in Poland began to use language as a weapon of national resistance. Polish was used for church gatherings and all religious instruction. As a result, a large number of priests and bishops were put in jail or sent to Siberia by the Russian authorities as punishment for their refusal to preach in Russian. The use of Polish came to be seen as a symbol of struggle against Russian dominance. That's all for today. We will see the left out chapter in the next part. Thank you.